Dear Blockwalks participants, please welcome on stage Mr. Jerome Grilleris, France, Mr. Alexis Menelaou, Cyprus, Mr. Anouk Pinchetti, Australia, Mr. Martin Kavats, Estonia, Mr. Stefan Unistrand, Spain, Mr. Robert Oxt, Slovakia, Mr. Suo Malainen, Sweden, and Mr. František Emertsai from Slovakia. These distinguished guests will discuss the topic of the main challenges and obstacles for blockchain and other smart solutions within the public sector. The panel discussion will be hosted by Mr. Yiannis Menelaou, professor at University of Nicosia, Cyprus.
Good afternoon, everybody. What an amazing place to be, Bratislava, for second year. It's a great honor to be here once again. Let me first introduce our distinguished experts. Starting from Jerome, he's a general manager Europe at VeChain with long experience in the banking industry, such as Goldman Sachs, Barclays. Alexis Menelaou, with long experience also in finance, electronic payments, and banking innovations. He's currently the CEO of Blockwalks and currently a board member of Grant Thornton Distributed Ledger Technologies. We have Mr. Anouk Pinchetti over here. He is a technology and educator, providing professional training to several bodies, such as big corporates and governments. This gentleman over here, Mr. Martin, with a strange surname, Kevats. He is the National Digital Advisor in the government of Estonia, or the Chief Innovation Officer of Estonia. Dr. Stefan, he is the CEO and co-founder of Grupo Tecmaret Spain, a leading media company over there, and is considered to be a leading international expert in the areas related to smart cities, intelligent buildings, sustainability, and blockchain. Mr. Robert Oxt from Slovakia, he's the CEO and founder of Etherbase, as well as a former member of the board of directors at the European Investment Bank and a member of the supervisory board of the European Investment Fund. David from Sweden, we have seen his nice presentation earlier this morning. He's a lawyer and currently works as an advisor for the Swedish government. Mr. František Emertsai from Slovakia as well, with long experience in the public and private sector, such as the Slovak Financial Administration, the V4 platform of the European Investment Bank, and currently holds a senior position at the IOTA. I think I haven't forgotten anyone, so let me have a small introduction about myself. I'm Yiannis Menelaou. I'm a lecturer at the University of Nicosia, and I'm as well as the president of the Cyprus Blockchain Association and a board member of the European Blocktech Federation. We represent more than 25 countries globally, and one of our partners is, of course, Slovakia. Today, we are going to discuss the main challenges and obstacles for the blockchain in the public sector. And in order to do that, let me go through a few slides just to help you understand the topic and the concept. Blockchain is here for the last 1 decade. We have seen many changes happening, good and bad, but we are yet far from its real impact. In the last few years, we have seen a massive interest in the blockchain startups. Was that a euphoria? Have we seen real applications in the space? It's just the beginning, I can assure you. The real value in business is expected to come in the mid-2020s, with a tremendous impact on profits, like a new internet. We are in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, and of course, blockchain is a part of it. While regulators and governments try to innovate and apply regulations in the advanced topics of technology, few manage to stay on pace, while some others overregulate. And that's an example we face in Europe. New technologies are very difficult to understand, but that's what it makes this space very interesting and very attractive to everybody of us. In order to achieve real success, of course, an appropriate ecosystem is needed, and it's all of those topics we have seen in today's conference. So we need to have a complete and healthy ecosystem. And of course, the beginning of a healthy ecosystem, it's all of us, the innovators, the entrepreneurs. Of course, in order to realize the projects and have real impact, real meaning in those projects, we need to have some capital to be invested in the projects. And of course, one of the best ways to do it is through corporates, through the private sector, where we can raise capital and use their expertise to commercialize projects. A significant part of this ecosystem, of course, it's the raise of awareness, and that can easily be happen, and it's essential to happen through advanced knowledge and research from the universities. Finally, a healthy ecosystem can be healthy and can grow sufficiently when we have the support of the governments at the local and, of course, at an international level, as we will see in a bit. And of course, there is always the big debate that, do we need the government? Essentially, we need the governments and the public sector to collaborate in such a way to keep the ecosystem healthy and push it for more to a global outreach. So we will try to get together today to analyze and see the potential of the blockchain through the challenges we face and see some possible proposals from the panel of our experts. Of course, and unfortunately, the regulators and the governments had a look at the blockchain through the cryptocurrencies initially, and with the increase in the prices of the cryptos back in 2016 and 2017. We have to acknowledge, though, that it has been a big effort by the regulators in the last 2 to 3 years at an international level. And we all know that regulators and governments are extremely slow. So we have to acknowledge that, and we have to support the governments to move on. And the most brilliant way, of course, to achieve that is through collaboration, through sharing experiences, and knowledge through all of those initiatives. And we see the collaboration results from 2017, 2018, and 2019. And we see that, indeed, this creates value and results. And that's why we are also all here together today. So a big process which is happening in order to achieve this success of the technologies, not only the blockchain applications, is of course the different regulatory sandboxes, which are controlled environments where innovators and companies can accelerate quite quickly. And of course, that is happening not only in the space of financial services or only the space of blockchain technologies, but it's of course happening across all industries, the ICT, including also the legal industry, the accounting profession, and all sectors of the real economy. But that's enough with the theory and what is happening from the side of the regulators. Let's move on to our distinguished guests and experts to discuss a few more things. Allow me to start with you, Martin, representing a country. You are the National Digital Advisor of Estonia. And you have you are the executive person to take decisions and guide the government about blockchain application as well. Can you describe to us what it means to be a National Digital Advisor and which steps do you take as a government to implement blockchain applications?
So, hello everybody. Basically in Estonia, being a National Digital Advisor means it's a kind of my in-house visionary position. So my work is to work with all sorts of new technologies, make them understandable for the bureaucratic apparatus, but also for the society at large. As an architect urban planner, my job in digital policy is to be responsible for the system architecture of the whole Estonian ecosystem. So kind of planting the new technologies, may it be blockchain or AI or whatever magic words people like to use nowadays, planting them into the system and in a way that some sort of emergence would occur. For those who don't know, Estonia already started experimenting with blockchain in 2008 April and actually implemented it in all governmental information systems in 2012. So blockchain gives us the full transparency layer, basically, and anti-tampering. So everybody, basically a citizen, go to a governmental website and see if anybody has changed their information or has requested any data about them, and it gives us a full transparency. I think one of those, and currently, well, very important to understand, Estonia is also, since 2001, we've already been a distributed architecture, both technologically and administratively as well. And this is something that in usual blockchain hype cycle myths, governments and corporates and everybody misses, is that, sorry, we should not put our energy into the technology, we should put it into the culture, because technology is not the problem, the culture is something that is much slower than the technology can be. We can have events about AI and blockchain and whatever, but it's in looking at from the governmental point of view, the difficult thing is how to change administrative culture. Something like David mentioned from before, from a linear process to an ecosystem. And this is all, I think blockchain is a global exercise of community building at scale and with scope. And it's good as is, but people miss out that, and also your introduction went into crypto. Sorry, this is not only about crypto, this is about actually making governmental processes much, much easier. And in Estonia, we have done quite a lot. We can do everything online except getting married, buying, selling real estate. And we are able to basically automate roughly 80% of all governmental bureaucratic routines within the next 7 to 10 years, let's say. Abolish, let's say, 80% of all bureaucracy. And blockchain actually plays a very key part in doing that. Very important is to understand the context. The context is that we are living in an age where technological change is coming more faster and faster. So from a governmental point of view, it's not about adopting those new technologies only, it's about building a system architecture that can adapt to changes rapidly. And this is a place where large-scale information systems usually don't work. You need to have a much more adaptive and a distributed architecture in order to withstand those changes constantly. So that's something that we are working on in Estonia. And if you look at it, the global picture, then I would argue Estonia together with Finland has the best distributed architecture from a governmental point of view globally. Our own goal is to build system architecture in a way that does not include Big Brother, and where every citizen is actually the owner and in control of their information. And this is the path we are walking on, and this is something that we would invite everybody to join in and contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, coming to you now, you had a very long and nice experience in the public and private fields as well, and you are also representing Slovakia. My question to you is that why did you run away from the public sector? Why did you get involved into the private sector and try to find solutions, possibly which were the challenges you faced?
I mean, like, first of all, thanks for inviting me here and being here. So essentially, I studied in a private sector in London as an investment banker, so I had some quantitative and sort of financial background. So it was at some stage quite natural when the Eurozone had sort of the crisis that I sort of joined the public service, because it was a very interesting area. And I was like heavily involved in like risk management, macroeconomics, monetary policy, and it was really my passion just to study financial crisis. And this was one of the biggest ones in our era, hopefully. So we'll see what the future will bring. And later on, I was always interested in like algorithmic trading, and Forex wasn't enough. And at some stage, there was a breakthrough in terms of usage of like Bitcoin. Then I found like ETH for like $1, and I like, what is this? And I think that was the first time when I realized that, okay, it has a much bigger potential than just, exchanging value across continents within a few minutes or hours. And just to explain very briefly what we do here, we are a digital asset exchange based in Bratislava. We roughly started 4 months ago. And we simply not just do that, we exchange one crypto to another crypto. We do actually launching several projects and products. Just to briefly explain, we are really trying to connect the most cutting-edge technology that we have on the market right now. Let's say it's actually not just blockchains. We actually integrate in some DEX or direct acyclical graph, which is essentially, I would say, the next generation of the DLT. And trying to implement this also into our backend systems. We are working and partnering up with I would say one of the leading companies in this area currently. Some of them, they already have several governmental contracts. One is even working with like US Air Force. So we are like one of the first companies that comes in touch with these technologies, with these ideas. We're trying to integrate them, implement them, test them. If they are secure, if they are not, the risk is on us, or I would say private sector. We also do run quite a lot of nodes for several blockchains, so we also participate in ecosystem. And also what is the most important factor, what we are doing, we are at a fiat gateway between the cryptocurrencies and digital assets to a fiat world. And this is one of the most complicated areas currently in this space, because you have lots of regulators around the entire globe with sort of different policies, different views. And let's say in this jurisdiction, there are a number of advantages. And like the biggest advantage is there is no like a clear regulation, or there is no like a strict regulation, because if you would move to like a New York, you actually have to have a proper licensing and everything. Here you can actually start any new idea, and essentially it's unregulated, unless you start dealing with stuff like AMLD4 and 5. Also, one important factor that actually stopped lots of projects in private area that would have quite tremendous impact to public sector were the legislation that came into force last year, which is GDPR, that essentially disabled lots of innovative projects, because essentially if you cannot erase the data on blockchain, it's kind of deemed almost illegal. So lots of projects were like, yeah, I'll take care of your health data, put it on blockchain, you can either sell it, monetize it, various interesting ideas. Essentially, the EU started creating GDPR like in 90s, when there was a, where classical databases were dominating the world. No one even conceived something like blockchains, going around the globe. So we had some very old piece of legislation being applied to brand new technologies, essentially stopping a good part of that development in this part of the world. And then you have other jurisdictions that just keep doing so. And maybe another area which is kind of coming to our doors is we have a financial action task force, which is actually advising lots of governments, and lots of governments are listening to it. And there's another huge clash that will be coming up into our sphere, which is there are jurisdictions that regard personal data as your own, which is the case of EU. And then you have the US approach, where the bank actually owns your data and it's their property. And if two US banks, let's say, you're like a crypto client, they can access your data, it's their data, they can exchange it. And they exchange it through what is called travel rule. And FATF is essentially saying that the travel rule should be applied to all the transactions on all the blockchains. But then, if I own my data through the GDPR and I say, oh, well, this institution is not supposed to push it to another institution because it's own, and I want to actually control this data, and it's extremely hard to do, and it actually contravenes what the GDPR is trying to say. So at the end, the problem will not be just technological or harmonization, it will be a philosophical sort of issue. Like us Europeans, having our approach, then, Americans, Asians, and a bunch of other countries. So what we are really trying to do, first of all, we are trying to be compliant with the local regulations, but also, we are speaking to, local and foreign officials, and trying to figure out a way how we can, first of all, serve our clients, develop new products, One of the, I would say, hottest debated issue is like Libra and stablecoin. In the meantime, we actually launched our own product, which is called Eurobase, and it's essentially a synthetic stablecoin that is anti-deflationary by its nature in the long term, which is actually achieved through, I would say, more active portfolio management and how it's essentially being pegged to other cryptocurrencies. And this is another huge issue that will come on the table of several regulators, because people are realizing that in Europe you are going to be hit with negative interest rates. Actually, today, just one of the major banks in Slovakia just announced that they're going to put negative interest on all the accounts above 100,000 euros. And what I actually expect that people don't want to be charged negative interest rates for a very long time. Also, the fees are relatively high. So there will be actually quite a push from these clients to move into not cryptocurrency. I wouldn't call it cryptocurrency, because these are essentially digital assets. And in various forms, they are either pegged or backed, and they can serve a very important purpose. The problem is, at some stage, if this grows very, very large, like in the case of Libra, you might lose the control over your monetary policy. And this is when it becomes very dangerous for the government, because, it's going to impact your taxes, it's going to impact your financial stimulus, and essentially you say, okay, well, I'm not sovereign nation, and at what stage even the inter-EU might not be as sovereign as before, because the ECB might say, well, but there are capital outflows, I don't know, to US, and people are actually not investing in euros or are not exposed to euros, and we've seen it already that the credit creation cycle doesn't work anymore. New banks don't want to issue credit in some new countries. So it's very important that the regulators, the governments, and the private companies actually sit at one table and kind of try to harmonize it to the degree that it's not detrimental. But on the other hand, they are not making laws and regulations such as GDPR that can actually, I would say, slow down, or that can be a key strategic disadvantage for this area against the rest of the globe. So I would say this is the most important factor, in the long run.
So I have to say, wow, you face so many challenges. So I will try to summarize what you said in 3 major topics. It's so many challenges indeed. It's the data protection, what we call in Europe the GDPR, the harmonization with regulations such as anti-money laundering directive. For example, now in Europe we will have the 5th directive, which covers also the cryptocurrencies. So it doesn't matter if you are a crypto exchange, if you are a business related to cryptocurrencies or tokens, you have to be harmonized as well. And of course, the 3rd major challenge is the banks and the licensing, in case you need licensing, the conversion from the cryptos to fiat, meaning from the crypto assets and digital assets to traditional currencies. And closing like that, I'm coming to a blockchain, to Jerome, for the $1 million question, because you have been against the regulators many times, accused about fraud and a lot of those challenges. But on the other end, you are also trying to support governments and promote transparency. Are you, as VeChain, being involved with the public sector? Do you help any governments? What are your experiences in this field?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So for those who do not know VeChain, we are a blockchain startup, and we developed a blockchain protocol, public blockchain, mostly for enterprise use, but we also from time to time work with public sector. So, I mean, actually now we have some projects that come from the business world that we're trying to adapt to the public sector. And the concept of the project is how do you capture citizens' behaviors that you want to promote, like to have a good environmental footprint or save CO2 emissions onto the blockchain. And the idea is that once you are able to capture this behavior, then you can start rewarding it, and therefore you can start expanding and making sure that more and more people will follow this behavior. So we in the public sector, we start simple, I would say. Like I think every new disruptive technology should start. No need to scare everybody off and say, okay, we're going to change everything right away. Let's do it step by step. So we work more at the level of the municipality. And again, the idea is to work with the local officials in defining what are their key objectives in terms of having a better life within the city. So the first thing that comes to mind is local mobility, and then is about all the ecosystem around this. So in other words, how do you make sure a city has less congestion? It's easier to move around without producing too much CO2 and so on. So the way we approached it is we work with also a large multinational, so which is a shareholder of VeChain. It's called the NVGL. It's a Norwegian certification entity. And together with them, we define what are the behaviors that we want to see. How is it possible to physically measure them? How to have an efficient measurement of this, and then how to operationally put that in place. How to collect information, because it's quite challenging to collect information from a technical standpoint, but also we mentioned it from a regulatory standpoint. So our experience has been that we have some good feedback. We're gonna probably announce that soon to have a pilot. We already have a number of municipalities that approached us, that are aware of that, and that want to start experimenting. So I think our experience is that if you start on something of a reasonable size, something that's meaningful, something that is real, and something that people care about, then it's a good way to succeed.
Thank you, Jerome. Alexei, you face the same challenges as the ones Jerome mentioned. You are also advisor at national level of Cyprus, but you are also leading an actual company which is trying to give solutions to governments and private and public bodies. Can you share your experiences with the public sector and possible solutions towards the real applications of blockchain?
Thank you, Yiannis. First of all, with this smoke machine behind me and the lights, I was getting ready to deliver a song in Greek, but I think I better talk about blockchain. You'll enjoy it more. First of all, a couple of words about Blockco. Blockco is a blockchain applications company. It basically revolutionizes the way companies manage leverage blockchain in order to issue, validate and revoke any kind of digital record. We're a spin-off of the University of Nicosia. University of Nicosia in Cyprus were the first university globally to actually offer a master's degree in blockchain and digital currencies back in 2014. They were the first university to actually publish their academic certificates on the blockchain, again in 2014, and they were the first university in 2013 to accept Bitcoin in payment of tuition fees. I don't know whether they kept on to that Bitcoin, but I hope they had. Now, a few months ago, the Cypriot government actually published their national strategy on blockchain, with the vision being to assess what difference the adoption of blockchain technology will make to the competitiveness of the Cyprus economy. There were a few challenges that were identified. First of all, the state of the technology, the legal status surrounding the technology, the need for consumer protection, and of course, implementing such a technology would involve time and cost of replacing existing systems. Some questions that had to be answered involved what impact it will have on the labor market, what skills will need to be developed, what impact it will have on the existing business environment, and of course, how courts will be convinced to accept smart contracts and data that was actually posted on the blockchain. Now, some key priorities were identified. First of all, how to implement a new legal framework, how to speed up the adoption of the technology, and of course, how to get it into the financial sector. Now, with regards to the preparation of the legal framework, the challenge was that there was little legislation out there, other countries that had implemented any legislation with regards to blockchain. And of course, being part of the EU, any legislation that was to be implemented had to conform with the existing EU regulatory standards. Of course, the right balance had to be kept between the benefits of implementing the technology and preventing the legalization of any proceeds from illegal activities that would result. Now, some general provisions in setting up the legal framework were that it had to be technology agnostic. There was a distinction made between public and private blockchains. The criteria was set on blockchain organizations to become legal entities. The establishment of how smart contracts will in fact be accepted by courts. And as a matter of principles, it was decided that certain areas would not really be touched. And that involved the work of miners, the node operators, the buying and selling of cryptos, the cryptocurrencies that are based on some of the critical blockchains, that is the blockchain Ethereum. Those was agreed that they will not be touched. There was consideration as to how tax law would be affected, and I'm sure we'll hear a bit more later on that. Initially, the view was that profits will be taxed on a net gain basis. With regards to the speeding up of the adoption, some of the so-called low-hanging fruit areas that were identified was some that have already been talked about: the land registry, the tax system, KYC, and some of the areas that our company is being active. That is education, the shipping industry, which is overloaded with paperwork, police department, my favorite one, the registrar of companies, the National Betting Authority, and a number of other areas. Now, with regards to promoting blockchain in the financial sector, there's already in existence an innovation hub within the Cyprus Exchanges and Securities Commission. It was agreed that they would, the government would reinforce that, and they would actually set up something similar within the Cyprus Central Bank. Now, facilitating banking transactions for blockchain organizations is of critical importance, and I think it's an issue that is faced by most European countries, and that's based on the fact there's no legislation, no regulation coming from the ECB. So that is a problem that we are facing as a company. We need Bitcoin in order to facilitate the transactions of our clients. They need to pay in Satoshis, and we cannot buy any Bitcoin from, through payment to a crypto exchange from a Cypriot bank. So we have to resolve to solutions abroad. That's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexei. Continuing the discussion from the banking and tax authorities, I'm coming to you, František. You have a long experience representing your country, Slovakia, through several senior positions. I'm very interested and keen to learn from you directly from that point, especially in the topics of taxation, how blockchain can help the public sector evolve, and also feel free to share some experiences from your interaction with startups or companies.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I represent IOTA here. In my case, IOTA stands for Intra-European Organization of Tax Administrations. I received already in the morning a lot of questions how I see the future of IOTA, meaning the cryptocurrency. My answer was, well, I do not dare to say. So in my case, IOTA means IOTA tax in Europe. Now, in relation to your question, I believe blockchain can help a lot. I mean, achieve higher efficiencies, and as Martin said, moving from a linear structures in managing processes to a more collaborative platform in managing processes. And when it comes to tax administration, it can help a lot tax administration to really become an enabler rather than an enforcer. Well, it has obviously a number of conditions and preconditions how to achieve that, and I see 4 elements of the preconditions which need to be addressed and changed to a more progressive way to be successful in blockchain implementation. Now, first of all, I believe the public administration in general does not have a full understanding of the fact that we are at the tipping point of the IT development now, that the world will change pretty soon. And the world, the way how the transactions are performed in the world. Maybe give you just one data. According to the latest report of the World Economic Forum, in 2018, the total global work, say it simple, was performed 71% by human labor force, 29% machines. In 2022, so 2 years from now, 4 years from the ratio in 2018, it should change to 52% labor force, 48% machines. That they might be not entirely right when it comes to this forecast, but I believe they are right when it comes to the trend. And this fact will really change how transactions are performed. And I believe the public administrations, especially tax administration, do not have a full understanding of the speed, how this will happen, because most of the transactions will be invisible for tax administration. There are a lot of transactions who are already invisible today. There are other elements. Martin mentioned the administrative DNA. It's also fear. The public organizations are very challenged of their investments, return on investments. There are tax systems in Europe which were recently changed based on the traditional technology. It requires a lot of courage, political support, and a lot of knowledge to say, I throw this away because I can achieve a higher efficiency through a collaborative platform. In Estonia, it happened, started from scratch on new technologies. Even old technologies today created an X-Road platform, providing one data about either judicial entities or physical entities to whole state. Now this courage is required and political support is required. Then it is harmonization. Actually from Alexis, I got a question just before this panel, how do I see the taxation of cryptocurrency? Now, how can I see it if there are many European countries who regulate cryptocurrency as a currency, Switzerland, Cyprus, Estonia, many others. And then there are many countries like Germany, France, Slovakia, Hungary, you name it, who regulate it as an asset convertible to currency, right? So I think we need to understand it is a currency, and then once we have aligned in this, then we can start to think how we will regulate it when it comes to taxation and try to achieve a fair deal with you. Digital tax. There is no harmonization on digital tax in the European taxation systems. OECD is trying to achieve that globally. Europe is trying to achieve that in Europe. And we need to have alignment on digital tax. I'm sure you know it. The only tax which is harmonized in Europe is the VAT. And that's only when it comes to the structure of the tax, not to the tax rates. I believe we are in a right trend, and there are a lot of examples. Sweden, there are a lot of examples in Europe utilizing blockchain in public administration in the right way. And I do not want to name all the countries, but typically the progressive countries when it comes to technologies. I believe there should be pilots, so we should start testing it. We should start proving that it delivers value add on changing how tax administration will treat customers and make it more collaborative. Give you an example. There is a huge challenge still within European tax administration how to cope with the international exchange of information, which is obviously legally regulated, but each country has a different system. Right, so to exchange it fast, it's really not easy, and to exchange it fast is critical for fighting tax fraud, because to fight tax fraud, speed is the key element. blockchain would be ideal technology to help that. And I believe the more and more we will have discussions like this today on Blockwalks, I mean public and private, when it comes on adoption of new technologies and reaching efficiencies, the sooner we go, we achieve pilots also in other countries than Cyprus, Greece, Sweden, Norway, and the progressive ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I will grab the word adoption from you and move to Anouk. Obviously, you are working with institutions, either to the private sector or to the public sector, try to raise awareness. And awareness, it's coming also from education. I'm also coming from the same background, and I face quite a lot of challenges, especially for professionals coming from more traditional professions like accountants, but also the public sector as well. First of all, which are the challenges you face primarily with the public sector, and which methods do you use to overcome those difficulties?
So there is definitely a lack of understanding of the technology. Most of the people I speak with in the public sector are just starting to get their head around how Bitcoin works and how proof of work actually works. And meanwhile, we have half a dozen other architectures, and we have different sets of paradigms of thinking. So, in terms of the corporate space as well, people are talking about implementing supply chains, but every company that is willing to put money in to build the supply chain solution wants to put themselves at the top of some way of extracting rent from the investment they've made into it, making it less of a cooperative and distributed, but rather re-centralizing again. And I think that is really the primary challenge, is some of the mindsets that need to change. And I think this technology really, it fits in with all the other technologies that are coming. This IoT, just tsunami of data that's coming our way, that we simply, with our current technologies, can't keep up with the amount of transactions and the amount of information and the amount of potentials for conflict that people can have. And if we couple that with AI, it's the combination of all these things that people really need to actually start to be able to keep up with the rate of change, and also be able to operate from a mindset where we overcome the original thinking that created Bitcoin, which was sort of this, down with governments and up with free market libertarian capitalism, which is completely winner takes all. And that is, that has the risk of making it worse for society as a whole, implementing this technology. Now, I obviously think it's a hugely empowering, hugely positive technology to be able to help society scale to a higher level of complexity, to move decision-making capabilities out to the edges where the intelligence already exists locally. Now, how I overcome the challenges of this lack of understanding is I try and take it slowly. And although I keep a keen eye on all the different architectures that are coming out and all the nifty little improvements that are coming thick and fast in terms of actually developing the technology, I start at the higher philosophical level to just say, look, we have, as a society, as individuals, we have the power and the potential to destroy ourselves many times over already. And if we are training our AI and we are training our automated economic systems on this winner-takes-all extractive logic, then it doesn't matter how we try and manage the conflicts will escalate to the point when there is nothing left to fight over.
right? So we need to actually think about where we want this technology to lead, and we want to build solutions that have the emergent properties that we want to create. I think that's sort of where I start, and before diving into, you know, this is the encryption technology, and this is how you keep your keys safe, and all the basic every day-to-day usage side of things.
Very good, very good. I'm always trying to be provocative to the public sector and to the public offices, to governmental offices. But we also need to give them some credits, and be a bit more positive. So, David, we have seen a very nice presentation from you earlier about the real applications in Sweden, and trying to be on the positive side of things. Which are the top 3, let's say, tips for us as individuals, as experts, as society, which we need to use in order to push the governments in this digital transformation?
So, yeah, does it work? Yeah. I mean, the 3 steps to push the government to adopt these new technologies. Yeah. I think that everyone has already said that, and that's knowledge mostly, to make everyone understand. I mean, the hypothesis is here that blockchain is a new kind of way of sharing information. This is distributed. Today, everything is done in silos, pretty much. And that's also a culture thing, as Martin is saying. And I mean, culture is strategy for breakfast. Culture, it's technology for lunch. I mean, so you have to change the culture, and to change the culture, you have to make everyone understand what's going on, what's happening, and how that will affect. And to do that, in my view, is to maybe not push a technology as such, but push the ideas of the technology. What does it bring? What benefit does it have? Starting with the values and principles instead. I think my data case at the Swedish Employment Agency shows that they didn't start out with a blockchain idea. They started out with the idea that the individual should have more control of the data and to be able to share it. Okay, what have we on the market? Yeah, we have a blockchain technology. Let's try this one. So I understand, of course, if you come from a blockchain technology company, that you want to push that, but I think it's more important to explain the benefits and make people more educated on what actually would be the outcome of using this. Then we can speak about protocols and whatever, but I don't think that's the main issue.
All right, thank you so much. Stefan, in your presentation, we have seen very nice examples of collaboration between real applications, which include also blockchain, smart devices, AI, and so on. Where do you see the future going on in real applications using blockchain overall? Because blockchain, it's a horizontal thing. It applies on all the different elements of an economy. And especially, it's much more beneficial combining blockchain with other technologies. From your expertise and experience, just on a positive tone, where do we see that we're heading towards in the coming few years?
Once again.
Let me take it again.
I think this one works.
We have blockchain and we have several other technologies as well, and we saw your nice presentation earlier. But where do you see blockchain coming, and how do you see blockchain coming and playing an active role in the smart cities concept in the future?
Yeah, I think, I don't think this, now it works, thanks. I think there are many applications. I think we discussed this earlier here during the coffee and so on, where to start. So in general, in the short term, I think we have to, and we will see mainly rather basic applications, like collecting data, and I think that's the way to go, because if you try to develop too complex solutions within the public administration, for example, voting or other kind of solutions that implicates the digital wallet, digital IDs, and so on, you will have to solve so many other problems which are actually not related to the blockchain itself. So I think the best solutions to start with, which are also related to the collection of data with IoT and so on, for example, register air quality, water quality, simple transaction and simple data that is a quick win and won't actually hurt anybody. Everybody can see the solution. It's transparent, both for the public administration as well as for the public. So you get a sort of general education on what blockchain is, what it can do for you. And also, of course, it's the value itself in using this kind of technology and connecting it with data, IoT. You can also, with that structured data, you can have open data for developers of the community to use in mobility, circular economy, and so on. So I personally think that those, due to the circumstances of lack of knowledge within the public administration and the difficulty to implement strong and disruptive technologies within the governance, that's what we're going to see in the near future. But I think those are really, really good applications because they're not complicated. And I think we get quick wins, we educate everybody, we get rid of the fear of the new technology, and we combine knowledge about blockchain, artificial intelligence, data analytics, and so on. So that's the way I believe it will go, and I also would say hope it will go, because the development of token economies and so on, that's a longer journey.
Thank you. Coming to an end, let's go through a few questions from the audience. I believe the first one we have already discussed it quite extensively about the bureaucracy and how we can move on. The second question, it says, if the nation state will provide security, then what is the meaning of decentralization? Why not have one decentralized service provided? I guess, Jerome, you can elaborate a bit more since you have a blockchain set up. So what's the concept of decentralization in the public sector?
So decentralization literally means a task is not going to be performed by one entity in particular. It's going to be sent to several entities independent from each other, and everybody's going to do its share of the work. In terms of security, if the question relates to national security, it's a tough question. But let me take a slightly different example, which is similar. For enforcing regulation, for instance, blockchain is a way to help governments to have a decentralized approach. The example would be, for instance, if you want to make sure, for instance, that data is collected in such a way that is compliant, then you can view. I mean, we have GDPR, obviously now that's applicable. So how would you go about, as a government in your sovereign territory? How would you go about making sure this is happening? Well, you could have an army of auditors and inspectors that will keep looking around. That's a centralized approach. A decentralized approach would be to go and look at all the largest companies that are involved with the data. So what would be those companies? It would be the likes of, well, the GAFA, for instance, like Amazon collects a lot of data, Facebook collects a lot of data, or Airbnb, all these platforms that actually either collect data themselves or aggregate small or let small businesses collect data. So instead of having the government going and checking all the companies, then you can start leveraging those companies, asking Facebook, yeah, can you demonstrate how you make sure that the regulation is in place within your ecosystem? saying the same thing to Amazon for all the small retail stores inside within Amazon, and so on and so forth. So this is a decentralized approach to making sure a regulation is complied with anywhere. So now you can think about it for security in the same way. I'm not an expert in national security, but I'm assuming that there's a number of companies like this that can help. And the idea is, instead of having the government that says, okay, I'm going to fix all the problem, then is gonna kind of pass it on to a certain number of companies that asking them to, at their scale, fix the problem and then report back.
Thank you, Jerome. And coming to an end, let's summarize what we have discussed today, and let's see some possible next steps on what we should do. We already discussed it. So we have already discussed the raising awareness, the communication between the public sector and the private sector. And that's also a big debate going again and again all over the world. And there are several studies around it raising this matter and possibly trying to provide solutions. So through the experiences we had in the last few years, we can summarize everything in those 10 bullet points. We need to specify the objectives on a feasible assessment. So the project has to be passed through several stress tests and see if it makes sense to have a blockchain solution or a combination with any other technology. We need to collaborate, of course, with the key stakeholders, and we have seen the 5 key stakeholders in the health ecosystem. These are us, the professionals, the entrepreneurs. Then we have the companies, the government, the capital which is needed, and of course, the knowledge, either through universities or through other public and private initiatives. You also need to come into communication with experts. These are the guys who have real practical experiences in the different fields. As I mentioned, blockchain is a horizontal, it's not a vertical, it applies to every sector of the economy, so it can be used in combination with other technologies. That's why it falls under the digital transformation. Don't be afraid to experiment. We also have now the different regulatory sandboxes all over the world, but even when a regulatory sandbox doesn't exist, then don't be scared, don't be afraid to experiment. And of course, utilize the regulatory innovation to support that capacity and that experimentation. Speak to your regulators, or in case there is no regulation, try to experiment, not overdo it, always stay within the limits, especially with the fraud and anti-money laundering. Of course, we will definitely face challenges, especially with the public sector. No matter how big or small the country is, but the technology progression never stops. Don't afraid to innovate and embrace blockchain in your activities. Let's give a big round of applause to our distinguished experts, and thank you for being here today. Thank you.